Hello, my lovely students. My name is Mary Glaspole, for those of you that don't know me. And for those of you that already know me, welcome back. It's been a while since I've recorded anything, but it's the summer holidays, and so I thought I'd take this opportunity to make some videos. In this lesson, we're going to look at the poem Exposure by Wilfred Owen. And I'm sure you're all quite familiar with propaganda posters of the First World War. There's Lord Kitchener, Your Country Needs You. That's probably the most famous. But also another one, We're Proud of You, British to the Backbone. Very jingoistic, very patriotic. These posters were very popular at the time when the government and poets were trying to encourage young men to enlist and fight in the trenches. They made the war look glorious, and fighting was noble and heroic, and it was going to be something enjoyable and something that young men would be proud to be a part of. But then you had the poet Wilfred Owen, and Owen died a week before Armistice Day, during the end of the First World War. And he wrote poems from the trenches, and his poetry debunked the ideas of the British government and the poets and the newspapers at the time. And it let people know that the war was not glorious at all. It was dangerous, it was deadly, and this is what he was writing his poetry about during the end of the First World War. The first thing to do when you look at a poem is to think about the title. The titles of poems and stories don't always relate to the topic, but in this case it does. An exposure has two meanings. The first meaning is to be vulnerable to something, quite often something unpleasant. And the second meaning is to uncover something. And what Wilfred Owen was doing in his poem Exposure was to uncover the truth about the effects of the First World War. And these are negative effects on the soldiers. All right, let's have a look at the first verse. And what I'm going to do is give you time to make notes on the techniques, literary techniques that have been used, and the structural techniques that have been used in the first stanza to present ideas about conflict. And you can pause this video if you need to in order to make notes. A copy of this poem is available in the description if you go to YouTube and look at the description box in this video. All right. The first thing I hope that you picked up on was the merciless iced east winds. And the technique that you've got here is a sibilance. And sibilance is repetition of the consonant S. It's basically a form of alliteration. Alliteration can be in different categories depending on the letter. And so sibilance is alliteration of the letter S. All right. And so sibilance can be positive, but it can be negative. And in this example, it's a negative sibilance because it creates an effect of the wind, and it's a very harsh and unpleasant feeling that's being created. Then we'll focus on a structure technique, and it's a good idea to look at the perspective from which the poem is being told. And in this case, you've got first person plural. And so first person plural is our, we, and us, for example. Now, why would the poet decide to write the poem from first person plural? rather than first person singular. And what it does is it makes us realize that this experience that the soldiers are having, the negative experience, isn't just affecting one person, it's affecting the whole battalion, it's affecting the whole army. So it's about the wider effects of exposure on the community in the trenches. Okay. The next thing to look at is the low drooping flares confuse our memory of the salient. And in this line you've got repetition of the vowel sounds, low drooping flares confuse. And this is assonance, which is the repetition of vowel sounds in poetry. And the effect of it is to create a sleepy, confused, drowsy sense. And this is what the soldiers are feeling as they are waiting in the trenches for something to happen. It's terribly boring, and they are feeling sleepy, and they're feeling confused about what's happening. But then you come on to line 5, and you have worried by silence, sentries whisper, curious, nervous. Again, we're going back to that sibilance. So although you've got a feeling of drowsiness and confusion, you've also got a feeling of being on edge and perhaps paranoid, concerned that something is going to happen. And this is portrayed to the audience through the use of the again, negative sibilance on the letter S. And it actually creates a sense of the sentries whispering to each other. And the last line, but nothing happens. And something we can say about this poem exposure is that the soldiers are waiting around. They're not actually participating in the fighting at this point. They are just waiting around and nothing is happening. Okay, let's go on to the second stanza. Watching, we hear mad gusts tugging on the wire, like twitching agonies of men amongst its brambles. And something we can say here is that you've got metaphor, agonies of men among its brambles. In the trenches you have barbed wire, and things get caught on the barbed wire. And so here you've got the fact that it feels like nature, because brambles are the stems on which blackberries grow, and they're very sharp and thorny and quite dangerous to prick your fingers. And here you've got the brambles being used in a metaphor to compare the barbed wire. And if you're writing not just about conflict, but if you're writing about nature, and how nature is presented in the poem Exposure, you can talk about the use of the word brambles and the metaphor. Northward incessantly flickering gunnery rumbles, far off like a dull rumour of some other war. Okay. And this last line, line 10, I think is the most interesting here, because it's being described as some other war and it's happening far away. So the soldiers don't feel like they're even participating. They don't even feel like they're part of the war. They feel like it's happening somewhere else. What are we doing here? And it's here that the writer and the soldiers start questioning the purpose of their presence during the war. What are they actually doing, waiting around? Because nothing is happening. They're not actually doing anything. Now let's look at the third stanza, and I'll give you time to think about the ideas that you'd like to talk about or write about in your essays. The poignant misery of dawn. All right, now misery of dawn, I suppose you could say it's an oxymoron, because dawn is usually a time of hope, of a new beginning, a new start, hopefully of things becoming better. But in this case, nothing is getting any better. And so this is irony. You expect dawn to be a time of rebirth and starting things over again, but everything is just the same for the soldiers who are fighting in these trenches. List of 3. War lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag stormy. Dawn massing her melancholy army in the east. Here we've got a lovely example of personification, as if dawn, the morning, is the enemy, because she is sending out, these grey clouds and this rain and this darkness to attack the soldiers. And something you can talk about here is that nature is presented as more dangerous to the soldiers than the actual war itself. I thought it was quite interesting that dawn is at the beginning of the line and it's capital D, and my personal interpretation of this, dawn is also the name of a woman, so it was an even better personification, because she's a lady, she's Dawn, and she's massing her melancholy army to attack the soldiers in the trenches. Repetition. Nothing happens. Again, it's this idea that the soldiers are trapped in this situation where they're fighting. The fighting is happening far off, and they're just sitting there with nothing to do except freeze. Have a look at the 4th stanza. Again, we start off with some lovely sibilants. Sudden successive flights of bullets streak the silence. I was saying that sibilants can be positive and sibilants can be negative. Here, the sibilants is softening the flights of the bullets, and it's making them feel as if they're not actually that dangerous. And that idea is reinforced in the next line. Less deadly than the air that shudders black with snow. The idea that Wilfred Owen was trying to work with was that the bullets are not as fatal, as deadly to the soldiers as the environment that they're living in. The freezing temperatures, the rain, the snow. This is what is much more dangerous to them. More sibilants. Flowing flakes that flock. When you think of a flock, you think of a herd of sheep, or maybe a flock of geese, and they're white and they're all crowding together. And this imagery was quite sinister to me, because I imagined the snow flocking together, all joining up together, and en masse being extremely dangerous. Then you have the personification, wind's nonchalance. And basically nonchalance means not caring about what's happening. And so it's the idea that although nature is involved in the war. Nature doesn't care what's happening to the soldiers. It's ruthless. And again, the line ends with nothing happens. In the 5th stanza, we've got the snowflakes personified, pale flakes with fingering stealth. It creates a real sinister atmosphere because we feel like the snowflakes are touching the soldiers and creeping up on them. And of course, we know that being out during very, very cold, snowy nights can kill you. And so this is very sinister imagery that's being used. We cringe in holes back to forgotten dreams and stare snow-dazed. The snow, because it's so bright when it's white, it's like when you're on the ski slopes, the snow, if you haven't got your glasses, the snow is so bright that it blinds you. And deep into grassier ditches, we drowse. They're feeling sleepy. And the reason that they are feeling sleepy is because this is the beginning of hypothermia and a loss of consciousness. They start to imagine being back home and being in a more pleasant environment, certainly a warmer environment. Littered with blossoms, trickling where the blackbird fusses. And so what you've got here is that the war is happening not just in the winter, but also in the spring. And so it's telling the audience that the war is lasting for a very long time. The soldiers, they start to question their reality. Is it that we are dying? The use here of first person plural naive narrators. You've got a whole crowd of soldiers who don't know what's happening and they've lost their reality. Stanza 6, I will give you time to analyse it for yourself and think what you could write about. Slowly our ghost drag home. And for me, this was about when you die, the out-of-body experience is you going back home to familiar places and seeing them one last time before you die, like your life flashing before your eyes. And these soldiers, they're dying of hypothermia. So perhaps spiritually, mentally, they're going back home for that one last time. And you've got lots of warm words: sunk fires, crusted dark red jewels. And that might seem quite nice, that they're having a daydream about home and being sat by the fireside. But actually it's more sinister, because what's happening is the soldiers are dying of hypothermia. And what happens to you in that circumstance is that you start to feel really warm, really hot, because your heart is doing everything it can to keep you alive and keep you warmed up. And so it's not actually a pleasant experience at all. It's the effects of what it feels like to die from hypothermia. Then you've got the innocent mice rejoice that the house is theirs. And I interpreted this as the house of the soldiers that they'd left behind. And the innocent mice, for me, this was about the men who never went to war, or the people back home who never had to experience the trench warfare. Perhaps even it is the men who have moved into the houses that the soldiers left behind. And so they're really happy because they've got their own house. Shutters and doors all closed on us, and the doors are closed. I thought that this was about the fact that the women back home, the families back home, and the friends have forgotten the soldiers. And they've moved on because the war has been lasting for a very long time. So these soldiers have become forgotten. And that's like metaphorically, the doors have been closed on them. Perhaps the wives have met different partners. Perhaps the children have forgotten about their fathers because they've been away from the war for such a long time. So there's a sense of isolation that the soldiers have become disconnected from their home lives, and everything has carried on as normal. I think that's probably the saddest part of this poem. And we turn back to our dying. So they're daydreaming, and they're coming back to the consciousness of the fact that they're about to die. Okay, let's go on to the next stanza. I'll give you time to think about it. In this stanza, I thought there was quite a lot of imagery about fertility, children, and the future. Nor ever sun smile true on child or field or fruit. And so for me, this was my personal interpretation of it, is that the soldiers are stuck in these trenches and they're not able to raise a family. They're not able to have children because they've got to stay and fight and see out this war. And then you come on to the idea that they're losing their faith in God. For love of God seems dying. And this is really about the futility of the war and the feeling that there's no hope. Even God has abandoned them. Anything else you have to say on that stanza? It will be interesting. Here's the last verse, and if you want to grab the dates of Wilfred Owen, it's 1893 to 1918. As I said, he died just before Armistice Day. The first line of this verse, his frost will fasten on this mud and us. It's the mud and us that stuck out to me because I thought that this was about how the soldiers who are dying are becoming part of the landscape. They're shriveling up, they're freezing to death, and they're dying. And then you've got the burial party coming to bury them or to perhaps take them away. Picks and shovels in a shaking grasp. So Here you get the anxiety, the exhaustion of the burying party, sensory language of feeling. Pause over half-known faces, all their eyes are ice. To me, this was metaphorical, because it's not just about the idea that the eyes of the dead soldiers are frozen. It's also about the numbness, the disconnect from emotions, the dumbing down of your emotions, because they've suffered so much. And so the burial party, they've been out there burying all of the dead soldiers for such a long time that they've become frozen, and they're just not feeling it. They're just numb. And this is what was coming across to me in this line, is that it's not just the eyes of the soldiers that are frozen, it's the eyes of the burying party as well. And then the poem ends with nothing happens. And that's the final futility, is that all the soldiers have done during this war is to freeze to death. They haven't achieved anything. It's completely, their presence here is completely futile. And that's one of the themes of exposure, is the futility of war. I hope you enjoyed this and it was helpful to your studies. And follow me on YouTube for more videos on the rest of the poetry in the Power and Conflict cluster. My name is Mary Glaspole. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.